Brian, I'd like to bring you in here now. I mean, TechMet is part owned by the US government. What's the sort of challenges of building a supply chain independent of China for some of these raw materials that Frank mentioned that are needed for these clean energy technologies?
Henry, I think firstly, to adequately supply the energy transition and the electric vehicle revolution with the metals and metal chemicals that go into these technologies, we do have to recognize the enormously impressive job and achievements of China over the last 20 years in scaling sources of production and processing capacity and technology. So while we do need to balance this overwhelmingly dominant position that China holds for the sake of American and other non-Chinese interests, we do need to, for better or worse, do it in partnership with China to an extent, because they have a 20-year head start and they're very, very dominant, and therefore we cannot achieve a successful global sustainable energy future without China's participation. So to sort of focus on the conflict and the competition is real and important, but it's not the whole story. To compete successfully, firstly, the extent to which we have to scale production and processing of these metals is a monumental challenge. You know, even in a very, very pessimistic forecast for electric vehicle demand, we need more than three times the present global annual supply of cobalt in 10 years' time. Annually, we need more than 5 times the present global annual supply in 10 years' time relative today of lithium, and probably over 12% times the total annual global supply of battery nickel in 10 years' time. You know, that requires a massive transformation of our industry, and we need to do that from a Western perspective with high ESG standards and with low carbon footprint. So how do we do that? You know, that is the big question. We need to level the playing field in terms of cost of capital, and to do that, we need government support. We have been the beneficiaries of equity investment by a US government funding agency, the DFC, and that needs to be just the beginning of a much more coherent and much larger scale of engagement from a funding point of view, from a regulatory point of view, in order to create the industry we need for this energy transition to succeed.
Yeah.
Firstly, recycling is very important and will play an important and increasingly important role in the supply of these battery and other technology metals to the supply, you know, to the manufacturing industries and automakers as they grow. But it's not going to be a solution. You know, in our view, in 10 years' time, a fully optimized and developed lithium-ion battery recycling industry, which we're part of through Li-Cycle in the States, will maybe provide 25% of the battery metal requirements for the electric vehicle industry at that time. So it'll be a contributor, but it's not a solution. China's role in the industry in terms of their dominant position across the supply pipeline is not only their dominant role in processing and producing intermediate chemicals and cathode precursors and cathodes and batteries in China. It is a product of what they've done in the Congo, what they're doing in Australia, what they're doing in Chile, to secure dominant or preferential positions with respect to supply of raw materials. And that's not an easy or quick thing to address and balance. You know, the mining, there might be plenty of lithium in the world. There's not plenty of tin in the world. There's not plenty of, vanadium in the world. There are other of these metals that are in much more structural short supply geologically, but lithium's not one of them. But even in the case of lithium, to scale global production of lithium and do it in an environmentally responsible way and a low carbon footprint way, to the extent that will be necessary for lithium-ion battery production in 2, 5, and 10 years' time, is a monumental task in terms of the scale, the technologies, the environmental licensing and execution of projects, and it will not be efficiently executed, and it will only happen to the extent it's needed if prices are very, very considerably higher than they are today to incentivize supply to meet the demand, which is unstoppable and inescapable. And that's quite apart from the China element of the equation. So the primary resource is a big constraint and a massive challenge. And recycling is not the answer, and China's not the answer. You know, the answers are all of us transforming our industry to go to a new level to supply this global transformation.
Perhaps, Brian, I'll come back to you here. I mean, you've had a long experience in Africa. There is talk of, the DRC, the Congo, becoming the Saudi Arabia of the electric age. I mean, what's your thoughts about, African countries utilizing their resource wealth to enhance their power?
Certainly the wealth, or at least the attraction of foreign investment, scale of development and health, hence wealth of countries like the Congo because of their copper and cobalt resources, Chile because of their lithium resources, Indonesia because of their nickel resources, will grow enormously as this energy transition unfolds. The question is what the impact will be of that and what the impact will be in those countries of the competition, primarily between China and the US and its allies, for control over these key materials. And that has good sides and bad sides, as we have seen in the oil-producing world since the 70s. It can be very stimulating of economic activity and infrastructure and the creation of, skills and wealth and a middle class and stability. And it can also be a catalyst for conflict and a catalyst for bad governance. So it will, as has been the case in the past, be a mixed picture. I think on balance, if those countries such as the DRC, such as Chile, such as Indonesia, and elsewhere are sensible at leveraging their resources into economic activity and wealth and bringing more value addition and manufacturing in country rather than just exporting concentrates and minerals in this, to China largely at the moment, but to other industrialized parts of the world as the industry becomes more diverse globally. The benefits will far outweigh the negatives, but it's a very complicated road that these countries will have to tread in this new geopolitical landscape.